Hi, this is Ben Barnier live from Paris, France. I'm inside the Stade de France, the very stadium where one of the attacks occurred tonight. I was actually attending the game. I'm a journalist covering sports, but also general news, and we've covered, as you might know, many terror attacks here in Paris this year. So I was attending the game, and I heard two very loud explosions. You might be aware if you've seen some soccer games that sometimes there are explosions, but are just fireworks, and they sound pretty loud, but they're not dangerous. This time around, the explosion was so loud we thought something wrong probably happened. An impression which was confirmed when we heard police sirens, or maybe they came from ambulances, rescue operations. What you have to bear in mind is that the game carried on. It did not stop, even though we heard the explosions towards the beginning of the game. It carried on for the full length of the game. It was a friendly game between France and Germany at France's largest stadium, the Stade de France, with 70,000 people attending. You might also be aware that there is a huge competition coming up in France. It's the Euros. It's going to be in less than a year with all the main teams in Europe. Now, I am inside the press room inside the very stadium where the explosions happened, not inside the stadium, but right outside the stadium. We were not permitted to leave the stadium first for security reasons as a journalist. Even though I was attending the game for sports reasons, I wanted to know what happened, so I tried to leave the premises of the stadium, but we were not allowed. You can imagine the sheer amount of police forces, beefed up security measures surrounding this tragic event. So we had to stay inside the stadium and try and figure out what happened inside the stadium. We also saw online that there had been other attacks, not just this attack outside the stadium, but other attacks in very popular neighborhoods. One of them I know very well because I used to live very near one of the locations of the attacks. So we stayed inside the stadium and tried to figure out what happened. We learned later on that it was at least one attack near a cafe near the stadium itself. And that there might have been people who actually died, people injured. We finally got a chance to leave the premises of the stadium after the game, after the final blow, and people were truly trying to desperately leave the stadium because they heard early on that they had been attacked and they heard explosions themselves. I saw children stranded on the pitch, on the ground. They could not get evacuated straight away, and they had to wait, I would say, nearly 45 minutes, maybe even an hour. Dozens of children stranded inside the stage, and some of them were very moved, clearly moved by the atmosphere, which was not light at all, very heavy atmosphere. So I saw some of these children crying. Some of them were with their parents. I also saw very nervous people trying to make phone calls and just tell their families and loved ones that they were okay. As you can imagine, it was the case. Same for me. I called my loved ones, told them I was fine. It is something you do when there is a tragic event. It is something that we had to do recently this year since unfortunately, we had several attacks here in France, especially including in the capital. So we've sadly got used to dealing with those events and trying to reassure loved ones that everything is fine. And now there are still many questions over what happened exactly tonight in Paris. We knew that the president of France, François Hollande, was attending the game, and that we heard from the head of the French Soccer Federation that the president evacuated first. He was moved quickly to a safe place inside the stadium and then evacuated outside the stadium. He held a press conference telling that exceptional security measures were being taken in order to tackle this truly exceptionally tragic situation where still gathering more information as to what happened in the other neighborhoods of Paris. You might have known that those behind the attacks earlier this year in Paris were claimed to belong to extremist terrorist Muslim groups, and but we don't have that information as for now for today's attacks. So we will surely gather more information from police, but this is still now a time for shock. People are in shock. This is was supposed to be an extremely happy event, and you might know that France did win on home turf against a very tough team, Germany, who are the champions. They won the last World Cup in Brazil. That was about a year and a half ago, but we heard from the head of the French Soccer Federation that the party was ruined, and it was ruined indeed with these attacks that struck very near the stadium. And as I said, the explosions were very loud. We wondered straight away what had happened, and you might be able to see some of the people near me, and all of them are journalists. Decided not to leave the stadium, but rather to stay here and gather as much information as possible, since this is one of the very sites of the attacks here in Paris tonight. Now, we're all also hearing that there might be beefed up security measures regarding the borders with France, with tighten borders. You might know that in Europe, people can usually move freely from one country to another under a special agreement, but this will not be possible. We are hearing again, these are all reports that need to be confirmed. This is still a moment of shock with contradicting reports. And again, we've been through this already at the beginning of the year in January, when terrorists attacked the satirical paper Charlie Hebdo. Those were people who were targeted specifically for what they were doing. They were drawing pictures of the Muslim prophet, and this was considering particularly insulting to some people, up to a point that they decided to carry out an attack on the offices of that satirical paper, Charlie Hebdo. There were also a police officer killed, as well as people inside a kosher supermarket right outside Paris. So again, we are talking about a country that has been traumatized. The wounds have not yet been healed from those attacks. It was the same year in 2015. And there hadn't been any terror attacks in France since the 90s. So truly, I think a lot of people, and I can talk as a Frenchman, I thought I could be safe. You can see now maybe this man with a child leaving. As I was telling you earlier, there were people stranded inside the stadium, and now being able to leave the stadium. The game has been over for nearly 2 hours now. But still, people are there. I'm just seeing now with you that there were still people stranded. I thought all of them had left, but obviously they had not. So again, this was supposed to be a happy event, a victory for France on home turf, again ahead of a huge tournament, and it turned out to be a party that was ruined indeed. On another front, there will be a large summit at the end of the month, at the end of November, with heads of state around the environment and issues about the environment. So clearly, French authorities are expected to take more security measures and try and avoid a repeat of such a tragic event. It was supposed to be a happy night, a happy day for people in France. Now the party has been ruined. I also cover sports quite often, and usually after the game, the players stop and talk to us journalists and tell us how they feel about the game. Clearly, this time around, it was not possible. The players left straight away, right after the game, probably to their boss, probably to their cars, and just left the stadium as soon as they could. I tried to get myself to the site of the explosion, very near where I'm standing now, but we could not get there. Police blocked us. There were trucks. There were police officers. You have to bear in mind that it is usual for football games, soccer games, to have a heavy police presence, just because of the sheer amount of supporters of people attending. But this time around, it was even more than usual. There were even more police officers, and clearly they wanted now and make sure that there will not be no more incidents around the stadium. So we just saw that some people were leaving. I am inside the Stade de France, for instance, largest stadium, where just outside the stadium, two very large explosions were heard. I heard them as I was attending the game. I'm a journalist based in Paris, covering general news, covering sports, international news as well. And so this is a live report from Paris, and my name is Ben Barnier.